Hey, welcome everybody back to DEFCON 1 Science. We've been a while since we had one of these. I know we've been busy. Landon's been busy. So this is the first one we've done in quite some time, and I'm looking forward to it like you wouldn't believe. Just a little preliminary stuff out of the way. I was asked to talk about this for a second, which I will. There has been, in the Flat Earth community, which we all know and love, some problems with the DMCAs. People have been going around from FE Core, journalism group, falsely flagging different channels, including Sly Sparkanes. Res Rhetoric did a thing on that while I was sleeping, so I just got caught up on it. So be aware to the Flat Earth community, the people that fight against the Flat Earth, that Flat Earth Core and journalism, and many of them are going around trying to falsely flag your channels. People have talked to YouTube about this. They don't seem to really care that much, but if we can keep pressure on them, maybe they will do something about it to fix the strike that's on Sly Sparkane's channel, and just keep being hyper vigilant on that. But anyways, for this episode, we have Maddie with us. She's also known as ScienceSideUp. We've got Landon, Curt, Noll, and we also got Dino Dapper. Dapper Dino.
There we go.
Change your name in a way that I can pronounce it correctly.
You could just say Dapper.
The Big D. We'll call you Big D.
Big D, yeah.
The Big
okay.
D. So tonight we're going to be talking about Nuke stuff. We're going to talk about Nuke School because Maddie here is a trainer, tutor, I don't know. Everything you did at Nuke School we'll go into. And I and Dapper here actually went through Nuke School, so we have a little bit in common there. And then Landon does actual training for, I guess, non-classified nuclear type stuff. So we're going to be talking about weapons a little bit, nuking hurricanes and all that fun stuff. But Maddie, first of all, thank you for joining us today. This has been months in the making. I've seen you on other channels, and I loved your content. So I was like, I got to have her on. This is like my quintessential program to have somebody who knows what they're talking about in nuke stuff on a nuke show, right? So welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here.
Can you see I'm excited? Can it sounds like it, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus I had a lot of caffeine.
Fair.
So tell us a little bit about your background and what you did in Nuke School, because a lot of people don't understand the intricacies of Nuke School and what we mean by being nukes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll start with nuke is Navy speak. So U.S. Navy speak for anybody who deals with the nuclear reactors that power submarines and carriers. So a little bit about myself. I did my undergrad at MIT. I double majored in math and Earth, atmospheric, and planetary sciences. And once I graduated, I accidentally talked to this nice Navy recruiter, and he asked me if I wanted to go teach physics on a beach in South Carolina. And I was like, that sounds like fun.
Gotta love recruiters. Mine said, join the Navy, see the world. He neglected to mention me that the world is 70% water?
70% water.
Saw all that.
Yeah. So I spent 4 great years as an instructor at Naval Nuclear Power Training Command. I taught enlisted kids for a while, and then I also taught, I say kids, gosh. Anyway, I taught enlisted guys for a while, and then I taught officers as well. So Nuke School is super intense for the enlisted guys. Just a rundown, they go through boot camp at Great Lakes, right? And then they come straight to an NPTC. And they've got 6 months of A school, which is where they learn what pumps are or how the different electrical systems work. And then they do that for 6 months, and then they come to the other side of the building and they spend 6 months just learning all things about nuclear power. And it's great. I taught physics, just in basic physics for the enlisted, when I taught on the enlisted decks, and I had 2 months to get them from what is a force to how do you calculate power output for a pressurized water reactor. And we did that in 8 weeks, and it was great.
So can you kind of give an overview? Obviously, a lot of that stuff is classified that we had in Nuke School, but but can you give an overview of what the coursework is like as comparison to like MIT and other things?
Yeah. So from my perspective, honestly, the pace, so like the amount of work you have to put in at Nuke School is really similar to my undergraduate experience. So for me, for undergrad, right, I did college very wrong because I was working like 80 to 100 hours a week to get decent grades. And Nuke School is kind of the same. You're putting in a lot of hours, and it's also like drinking from a fire hose is the best analogy, I think. So it's a lot of information thrown at you really, really fast. The main difference, I would say, between like 6 months in nuke school versus like an undergraduate degree at MIT is nuke school is you learn a little bit about a lot. And for the enlisted guys, they go into a lot of depth into their own rate. But there's this knowledge that like they're going to now, once they get through this academic like coursework, then they're going to go to prototype, which is another 6-month long school where they sort of practice operating the reactor. So they get a lot of the depth there. So MIT is really deep, really fast. And I'd say like nuke school is like you learn a lot about everything, or a little bit about everything really fast.
So as far as like the pace, maybe not the actual in-depth, because like you said, MIT goes very, very deep, but as far as the pace and the difficulty and the attrition rate, would you say that nuke school is probably only second to MIT?
Yeah, that was nuke school. That's what I always said, was that nuke school is second most difficult academic program in the country. First is undergrad at MIT.
So if you can make it through nuke school, you could probably do okay in MIT then. You think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I didn't take advantage of that. I didn't go to MIT, but I took college for a couple of years, obviously. But yeah, it's difficult, and it's hard to express the pace that people go through for nuke school, and a lot of people do, mock it. They're like, oh, well, Steve's a nuke. But you know what? I'm proud of it. I'm very proud of it. I put a lot of work into that. It was very difficult. Dapper here was a nuke, and I'm sure, Dapper, you are quite proud of the achievement of graduating nuke school, because I think it is the most academically challenging, number one program in any military, and second only as far as pace to MIT, probably.
And it has a pretty high dropout rate, too.
67%.
A lot of the guys that go in do not end up. I think the dropout rate has gone down in recent years, but that's mostly because they've upped the acceptance standards. Because they were tired of having so many people go to the school and so many of them fail out. They were like, we're just going to up the requirements to actually get in.
Now, what year did you graduate?
Oh, let's see. I have to think back when I got out and then do math. So, I think that probably would have been 2003.
Okay, so I went through in 1987 and I got out in 1993. So yes, that was much harder back then, I can imagine. 67% of my pipeline failed.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yep. It was very, very difficult. And also, I didn't get a bonus. I guess now they're giving $10,000 bonuses. They're giving I think the SRB is over $100,000 for 2 years. So yeah, they can't afford to let people go. So they're offering them a lot of money, because it takes, what was it, $250,000 to train a nuke?
Something like that.
Yeah.
But their retention rate is still pretty low. That's one of the reasons why they have to offer that. Because it's a job where you have, 20-year-olds looking at, 60, 70 grand for a 2-year contract, and they're just saying, nah, I'd rather not.
Well, I only was offered $30,000, and I was like, I turned it down. But they're much higher now. But Landon, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah. So I have to say, by the way, with all due respect to MIT,
I knew this one's coming.
The academic work at Cal, Berkeley, and Caltech are also not to be trifled with. And but seriously thinking,
they're great schools,
and by the way, I have a story, an Edward Teller story involving a victim who was an MIT student. But we'll get into that little tale later.
Canon.
Yeah. So I have not been in the military, and I was in government circles where nukes were nuclear devices, not people who went to nuclear school. And some people, when you talk about nukes, have a really big confusion between what is a nuclear reactor and what's a nuclear device, and what they do, and the public sometimes gets confused over the whole thing as well. And so I want to talk a little bit about the similarities and the differences on those sorts of reactions.
Maddie, do you want to maybe give us a basic overview with that? Yeah, you know what? Go into some reactor core dynamics. It doesn't matter. Reactor flux densities. Oh, it doesn't matter. Nuke stuff. It's cool. My audience is smart. They'll catch it up pretty quick to the conversation. But the difference between why nuclear power and nuclear weapons are similar, but yet quite different in a lot of aspects. And by the way, you can talk about K-effective. You can talk about delayed neutron precursors. Like I said, my audience right now, they're pretty smart. So they probably know this. I think I got a couple nukes in there anyway, so they might enjoy you actually having some technical talk for a change.
Okay, sweet. Yeah. So what I I like to say that the one of the main differences between nuclear power plant and like a nuclear bomb is that nuclear power plant is a lot harder to make. It's a lot easier to make something that works once than it is something that works.
It's only got to work once.
Yeah.
I might dispute that, but please go on.
I love that. It's got to work once.
It's got to work once. So if we want to talk about K-effective, so the effective multiplication, gosh, it's been half a minute since
effective multiplication.
Effective multiplication factor, yeah, and the neutron life cycle. So the goal for nuclear power, right, for the most part, is to get your reactor to, like, you start up, you get 2 critical, so you have, that K-effective of 1. So you are producing exactly as many neutrons as you are using, and then you sustain that. What's fun about Navy nuclear power as opposed to civilian nuclear power, because civilian nuclear power is actually super boring, right? Because the goal of a civilian power plant is to start up, be critical, and stay there until you shut down and have to refuel. But like on naval plants, right, your power demands change, and so you're going to like increase your power output. So temporary go super critical, and allow in a controlled manner, right? So allow that of greater than 1, or if you can come like bring power back down, et cetera, so forth, like at prototypes. Which is where greater than 1 nuclear operators you train like to bring power back down, operate et cetera, so forth, like at prototypes tied to piers, which is where greater than 1 nuclear operators you train, start up and shut down procedures every single day, just to get everybody qualified and all that jazz. So that's a lot more exciting, and you do a lot more things with a with Navy nuclear power than you do with like civilian. And in terms of okay, so like a nuclear power plant, you can't turn that into a bomb, right? That's like people's like fear of nuclear power is that it's going to turn into a giant nuclear weapon, and that's not real life, right? Because it can't do that. It can't blow up.
That's a good point, though. As people that are trained to operate a nuclear power plant in the civilian sector, you don't do a lot of reactor startups and shutdowns.
No.
And then in the military, you have to be trained a lot on that. And there's a whole bunch of things that go into that, because when you shut down a reactor, you have a lot of things that occur. One of which you have like xenon and samarium, promethium. I'm doing it now. Samarium and promethium, and technetium, and all these other things that have been produced. And the xenon decay rates, since xenon is a neutron absorber, you have to wait a certain amount of time for that xenon level to go down before you can start up the reactor again, or else you have to raise rod height very high to add enough reactivity to the core to go critical again. Because your goal is to go super critical for a while, get up to power, get up to point of adding heat, and then be critical sustained. Well, we shut down and stop the reactors a lot. We shut down and go to the other plant. We do different lineups. And you don't do that in the civilian sector. So that's something that they probably don't have to learn a lot about as far as they'll shut down and startup procedures.
Yeah, sometimes they shut down the reactor just because they feel like it might be a good training exercise out in the middle of the water.
Right.
Yeah, right. It's like, oh, hey, we're on deployment. It's 2 a.m. Let's have a drill that involves shutting down one or both reactors on an aircraft carrier.
But do you think that's because they do that, you learn the material exceptionally well because you're understanding the concepts going into the reactivity addition rates in the reactor? Because I'm all about concepts. I think the concepts are important. And so when you go through nuke school, that's what they want you to understand, why things are the way they are. I mean, you can do a lot of rote memorization, don't get me wrong, but they really want you to understand the physics behind the reactor working in an in-depth manner. And I think that's different from the civilian sector. Yeah. I think they do a lot more just kind of rote stuff, maybe. I don't know.
Steve, I do think we missed a super chat from.
Yeah, I know. I'm collecting the super chats.
Oh, okay.
But
okay, I didn't know if you were.
But
Never mind then.
But Kawasa 5,000 won. Rumor has it Nuke School is rowdy and raunchy. True or false? I didn't. I didn't find it to. I went in when it was all guys. I guess women could be nukes now.
Yeah.
So it was. Yeah, we didn't have we didn't party at all.
I would say there was.
It was time. We were at Nuke School from 7 o'clock in the morning to midnight, at least.
On the few hours that you had off, maybe on like a Sunday morning or something, or like a Sunday evening if you went in the morning or something, people liked to let off steam as much as possible because you didn't have a lot of time to do that otherwise. But that's
just on mandatory 35 for a while. Who had time?
Dude,
well,
can I tell you about
please
open captain's mast?
Please.
Right?
Tell
everyone standing out in the August Charleston sun because of the barracks orgy.
What? What? Get out.
I'm not kidding.
Wait, what year was this? And by the way, I went to school in Florida when Nuke School was in Florida.
Oh, you were okay. I knew you were going to be old enough. No offense, but for Orlando.
Oh no offense. Oh, I'm old. It's cool, man. I get it. Trust me. But yeah, no.
Dapper, you would have been. Were you in Charleston or?
Oh yeah, I was in Charleston.
Charleston. Okay.
Yeah, Charleston for A school, power school, and then I went to the Boston Spa prototype.
Gotcha. God, Boston Spa is so jacked up. They can't keep those.
So tell me about this, because I heard about the cheating fiasco.
Yeah, we need to talk about that at some point.
Yeah, but not the.
Okay. In the 4 years I was there, though, drug ring, right? Barracks drug ring.
Yep, sounds right.
Wow.
Open captain's mast for barracks orgy. That was my favorite.
Okay.
What was the other? That was such a weird day. It was such a weird day. It was some group of people, and for like 3 days, there was like 12 of them, and for like 3 days, they were just in because they were in the suites. So the barracks are like you have 2 people into a room, and then 2 rooms share a bathroom, right? And so in that space, there were like 12 people, and I forget what video game it was, but if I could remember the video game name, if there was anybody, and this is like really famous, it's famous within the Nuke community now. Yeah, they were just like playing the video game and barracks orgy, and I had to listen to the captain explain why that was.
So what happened? What happened to them? I never went to captain's mast. I had XOI once, but I was totally exonerated.
Yeah.
But XOI is nowhere near captain's mast. That's nowhere near. So I had a good contact medal. I never really got in trouble. I had just like any military person, you always have that one chief that just rides your ass. Right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I had that. Never forget him. Hope he's dead by now. But but
I think most Navy guys have a few of those.
You always have one in the military, don't you? That one person, right? But so can you explain what they did in captain's mast? Because like I said, I didn't go to captain's mast ever, but.
Yeah. So and this is specifically open mast. So for people who don't understand what that means.
I never even heard of that before. I didn't know it was such thing.
I've never seen one.
So that is the captain decides that the offense is so egregious that every single person at the command needs to witness him deliver justice.
Wow.
Right? So NMPTC has 5,000 people, right? And so it's a 5,000 person command, most of whom are students, about 4,000 are students. So there's not an inside space where we can have this. So no, we go out to the circle, to the Rickover circle in the back of the building.
Admiral Rickover.
Admiral.
Oh man, I walked that circle many a time.
So many times. I walked it a lot at 3 a.m. because that's when I had to do a command tour, and I counted a lot of deer. But anyway, so just imagine thousands of people in dress uniforms, because of course it's on a Friday, thousands of people in your dress uniform standing at attention outside to listen to the captain explain why orgies are bad. Why
oh God.
That's just mind-boggling.
And that's how I got to spend a
First
Friday.
of all, he was making a moral judgment I may or may not agree with, but besides that, but how many people were actually involved in the captain's mast itself rather than the people just watching?
They're about 12.
Well, and
They're about,
did they get kicked out?
I think they all got denuked.
You know,
Yeah. So I don't know if they like. So
That doesn't sound like. Oh, sorry. I was going to say that doesn't sound like a out of the Navy offense. It sounds like a reduction in rank and get out of the Navy.
yeah, well, yeah, the nuke program. The nuke program has people may you can elucidate on this more, but the nuke program has one of the highest ethical standards of any program.
Mhm.
Yeah, they don't even allow. If you think they think that you're cheating, they think that you're looking over at somebody's paper. They think anything. You are toast. They don't mess around. At least back when I was in, I know they had a cheating scandal, and that was huge.
Yeah.
But yeah, the ethical considerations that the Naval Nuclear Power School, they want people that are ethical people.
Yeah. Yeah. So I see a question in the chat, like, were the captain's arguments convincing? I mean,
No orgies on base.
and that's actually the thing is you can't do it in the barracks. That's the rule, right?
So this happened off base. It wouldn't have mattered.
No, it wouldn't have mattered.
That's true. I mean, no.
Yeah, there's no rule about that.
No. I mean, hey, I enjoyed after boot camp. I was in Florida, and as you know, boot camp wasn't co-ed, but we had a sister company. So we had the males and we had the females that were sister company. Everybody hooked up back then, but it was all off base. We never did anything on base.
That's the thing. It's not a problem if you get a hotel room off base. Like,
yeah, and it was. I remember those days, but it never on base. This is why I'm kind of going. Who did this on base? I mean, first of all, it wasn't.
I think there was also a good amount of underage drinking, which was something I was
always
care about.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, on base you can drink at 18, but you can't drink hard alcohol, only beer.
That's not real life.
No, that's not anymore. That's gone.
Oh, they changed that? When I was in San Diego, at least, and I think in Florida, but I know for a fact in San Diego, if you're 18, you could drink on base 3.0, I think it was, or less alcohol content, but you couldn't drink hard alcohol.
No, it's just straight up under 21, zero alcohol.
Okay, they just put the kibosh on that.
If I'm going to remember my training, 0013, 0 drinks if you're under 21, 0 if you're going to.
You're quoting NADSAP now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. What was
I have
the
my
worst
NADSAP training thing.
What was the worst thing that anyone caught me doing at Power School? And it was hiding liquid bleach in my locker because I was tired of having my whites not come out white.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Do you know the main thing that I got yelled out for Power School? I had donuts. It wasn't even my donuts, but it was my roommates. But we were eating them. But we had donuts in one of the like desk or something. That was the worst thing that I ever got busted for. But all I had to do was get chewed out. You can't have these in the barracks. I was hungry. But anyways, so let's go into some more nuke stuff as far as like nuclear weapons.
The
science stuff. Yeah, this is great.
A
couple of things. I have to say, when my encounters with the Navy program and nuclear sub, the people on the sub were exceptional in their ability to understand what's going on, even the devices that they were not using. In terms of the knowledge of that. So one thing that sometimes is a misnomer is that a nuclear device has to work all the time. It's not a matter of saying, oh, they're going to sit around and then they go bang. When from the time of manufacture to the time of decommissioning, it has to work properly, right? And one of the things working properly is not going off when you don't want it to go off, right? And unlike, for example, a nuclear power plant, that could be the ability to monitor and to make adjustments to these devices is quite limited. Yet they have to last a long time. Now, if you look at the history of devices, and you look at the number of times a nuclear device went off by accident, you'll find it to be a very, 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 very small number. Now, delivery systems, airplanes doing the wrong thing, subs doing the wrong thing in countries, those have had problems of when there's been, quote, accidents, it's been a device carrying it that has gone off. But they've had, for example, rockets go off inside a silo, and the device did not trigger, right? So that's one thing to understand, is that the device has to work for a very long time. In many ways is in an unintended mode. Another thing is that the nuclear devices are extraordinarily complex. The modern devices are a multi-stage system where you start off with fission to get some fusion, to get some fission, to get some fusion, to get some fission, right? It's not you have a bunch of hydrogen, you go boo, and the hydrogen fuses, right? It's a very precise process. So the devices go through modes, right? From the mode begins in manufacturing, right? And again, you want to manufacture a device, and you don't want to have it go off in your factory. You want to test a device to make sure it goes with quality assurance, but you don't want it to go off, right? And then you want to maintain that device in a state of readiness until there's a command to change its mode of operation, and then it becomes.
So, yeah, you want to test like the triggering is right. You want to test that it will actually when a nuclear weapon detonates. And again, your area here, but from my understanding, there's different stages that it goes through in order to prevent accidental detonation. Each stage has to be a very specific thing, and then, for example, like look at the one that was dropped in Hiroshima. That was a teller design, if I'm not mistaken, right? It was a cannon. Then it had TNT on both sides, and it had uranium on both sides that were less than critical mass. And when they were slammed together under excessive force, they would get a geometric shape that was small enough where the neutrons that were being produced were not escape, so they would go on to produce fissions. This would create a supercriticality event that would detonate. But you don't want that happening accidentally. So there's different things that have to be done in a sequential order in order for a nuclear weapon to actually detonate. Is something along those lines?
Yeah. Now I should point out, by the way, Little Boy was not a teller design.
Oh, it wasn't a teller. Okay, so because the Yuri teller,
it actually was there was a professor and grad student that did the design of the device, and in fact, the very first device that was detonated on Hiroshima, in war, I should say, was a device that was never tested. Right? They were so certain of the device's ability to yield that it was made only once and set off, and it worked, and no one was surprised, really. I mean, Japanese were surprised, but no one's in a nuclear program was surprised it went off. The thing, however, is that device and its configuration was extraordinarily dangerous. For example, in Little Boy, the Little Boy was nothing more than a cannon where half the cannonball was part of the critical U-235 mass, and the target was 235 mass. So basically, the cannon plowed two lungs together to achieve critical mass and went off.
Yeah, it's a cannon design. That's right.
Yeah. Now they were so concerned with the device and its ability. It literally was. There was a powder keg, and it pushed the one set into the other, one item into the other item, and achieve criticality. So they were so concerned with that device that the powder keg was never put into the device until the airplane was in flight, nearing Japan, and some guy had to go crawl back into the bomb bay, open it up, and put the powder keg physically in the device and close it up and get out of there before the bay doors locked. So it is actually was quite dangerous, and much like some of the early nuclear reactors, we would never build one that kind of design now, but because we know better. And the same thing, that device, and while it is fairly certain, if you build it the right way, of it being having an event, it is actually it's fairly poor yield. I mean, the yield on that device is only about 20% of the material, because it basically the reaction blows itself apart, and you get a lot of unspent fuel. So you had a lot of mass for very little yield, I should say.
Yeah, it's a pretty inefficient thing. You don't when
Yeah.
a nuclear weapon goes
Well,
off, it doesn't convert all the fuel.
For a nuclear weapon, it's inefficient. But for a chemical explosive, that would be great.
Yeah,
Well,
but
yeah,
again,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not. And the other thing, of course, is that the trigger mechanism is really uncontrolled. So, and the big problem, of course, is that you've got to generate a lot of U-235, an isotope of, you've got to be able to collect a lot of isotope of U-235 without contaminants. And that's the problem. It's an easy design to build. It's dangerous to build, but it's hard to get that much material together in that process. The thing that is part of most of these devices have, so they have to operate perfectly throughout their lifetime. And if they get involved in an event such as a test, or let's say there was unfortunately a war, you'd have to have a whole series of events saying, we deliberately want you to go off, and then a whole process go involved under there. Now, the main thing that happens in these devices are we have these events called shakes, and the term is a shake of a lamb's tail, and a shake is defined as 10 nanoseconds, and that's roughly the time where let's say an atom splits and generates 2 to 3 neutrons, depending on things. And those 2 to 3 neutrons then go out, and at least one finds another nucleus to merge to. That process is called a shake. And that's where you get your exponential curve. Now, in reactors, you want to keep that at 1, right? That's kind of the design of there. And in fact, reactors are nowhere near the configuration you would need in order to make a nuclear weapon. They've got too much stuff in the wrong configuration to go off. You could not set off a nuke next to a reactor and get much of a reaction, right? The reactors don't go boom like that. The processes involved in there. One of the problems is that when reaction goes in, when the device goes into its energetic phase, you've got to keep the integrity of the device through extraordinary pressures and temperatures that are far exceed the temperatures inside the sun, and pressures, and yet you've got to be able to get any kind of yield. You've got to have those last tens of nanoseconds mean the difference between a fizzle and a big bang. And it's kind of funny because that it feels like, well, 10 nanoseconds, that's a short amount of time. It's actually an extraordinarily long period of time. I mean, light can travel 3 meters or almost 10 feet in that time. Because what happens is a neutron comes in, hits an atom, the atom becomes unstable and begins to violently oscillate, is the current model. And at some point, the oscillation becomes so violent that it overcomes strong nuclear force, and you now have 2 nuclei right next to each other. And then what happens? Well, the repulsion of the protons to each other cause the 2 nuclei to fly apart at enormous kinetic speeds, and that's the energy you get. Most of the energy you get, I mean, you also get gammas and other things in there too, but a lot of the energy comes from that kinetic thing of those 2. Like if you had 2 magnets that were really strong, you brought them closer together, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. The same thing, 2 nuclei being right next to each other, the repulsion causes them to fly apart at enormous speeds. And so part of the problem of having a device go through phases is that you start this reaction going, and if you don't do it right, the reaction kills reaction, right? That's really one of the difficulties in device manufacturers. Some of the simplest type atom bombs that have been done on the Manhattan design, the Nagasaki designs, have been replicated by a number of countries, unfortunately. But the ones who can do really, modern thermonuclear type devices, and these are these multi-stage things, United States, France, Great Britain, Sweden, although they never nuked their device, Russia, and to some extent China, are the ones that can demonstrate the ability to do the thermonuclear sets. The thing that North Korea has done, they seem to have essentially fusion boosted atom bombs. They're not very high yield. They're not modern devices, fortunately, because the last thing we'd want is a nutcase in North Korea with fairly powerful nukes. So again, I guess to say that the program itself, knew the dangers of the Hiroshima bomb, although knew it certainly to the point where they never tested it. Hiroshima was the first test of that type of device, and to my knowledge, publicly, the U.S. has never built a device like that again. I don't know about other countries, but shame on them if they have those devices. Just like, for example, no one in the right mind would have a carbon pile if you had Chernobyl.
Real quick, we got a super chat real quick. £2, just a gift for you, Steve. Thank you, by the way.
Yeah.
But let's get Maddie in here real quick. She's probably like, are they still here? Sorry, Maddie. Landon's the smartest man on the planet. He could talk forever. Like we could stream like 24 hours a day and still be like.
But anyways, I wanted to give some contrast to stuff. Of the nuclear power people typically use.
Yeah. Sorry, if I'm looking up to the side, my very old dog is wandering around.
Hi, old dog.
Yeah.
We love dogs, old or young. Puppies. I love puppies. I don't kick puppies as people think I do. I love puppies.
Puppies are delicious.
So there was something that you said, Landon, that I wanted to like speak on like
Sure.
major differences between nuclear weapons and nuclear reactors, and that has to do with the percentage of the uranium that is uranium-235.
Yes. Or yeah.
Yeah.
Percentage of fissionable material, yes.
Yeah, percentage of fissionable material. So for those in the audience that might not know, if you were to go out into your backyard and dig up some uranium, right, which I assume you have in your backyard.
Yes, you have a backyard, you have uranium and thorium and other things in there. It's
exactly.
Very common.
Which is my favorite. So 99% of what you dug up would be uranium-238. Uranium-238 is not a fissionable material. Only 0.7% of what you dig up is going to be uranium-235, and then the remaining 0.3% is uranium-236. Of all of those, only uranium-235 is fissionable. So for a power plant, you need to enrich that uranium up to, in the US, most pressurized water reactors for civilian purposes use about 3% of the uranium in those fuel rods for the civilian design is uranium-235. There's actually, Canada has really cool, they're called can-do reactors, and so I like them because of the name. The Canadian deuterium reactors, and they actually run off of unenriched uranium. So the amount of fissionable material that is in the fuel most of it is not fissionable, and that's one of the safety things about nuclear reactors, and one of the reasons why it can't be a bomb. There's not enough fissionable material there. Whereas for a nuclear weapon, you need it to be effectively all uranium.
Yeah, it's not just the amount though. It's also the geometric configuration is completely non-optimal for a
one of the things in particular inside a reaction, a critical mass, to achieve what we call criticality in a nuclear device, is that you have to avoid certain materials that would just steal your neutrons, right? For example, thorium is a really big poison inside, let's say, a critical mass device, because it stores neutrons and doesn't do what you want to do, and it delays the reactions. Now,
sorry, I'm going to interrupt you really, really fast. I'm going to science translate for the audience. So, a reactor poison is something which will take in a neutron, it'll eat a neutron, and then keep it and do nothing with it. Whereas something like uranium, right, is going to take in a neutron and then give you more neutrons back after it's
Yeah.
out.
So like
that's,
So cadmium, barium, these are
barium,
things
boron,
that,
those are all poisons, doping agents, they're called.
like
Yeah.
I said, science translator is like one of my main jobs. So
Love that.
Yeah,
I love
so,
that
so
stuff.
one
No,
thing
yeah,
in
I love
particular,
that stuff.
one of the things in particular that also in terms of there's a thing called a weapons grade, right? And people say, unfortunately, it's a bad term, and it says, well, if you're 90% of your mass is fissionable material, you have weapons grade material. The problem is that you don't need weapons grade levels in order to produce a device, right? If you have lower percentages, it requires more material. It's more wasteful, and your yield is not as good. But you can get, for example, the very first devices that were detonated over Japan were not weapons grade level.
Right, that would have been. I don't think we had the technology to get them to weapons grade level.
And it got the cost, right, and the time to get them there was there, and the processes involved. So that's one of the problems. Now there's a very big difference between enrichment and fuel reprocessing, right? Enrichment is where you go from that 0.7% to some percentage which you want to have in a reactor. Isn't that around 3 to 5%?
Yeah.
3%, yeah.
3% for civilian.
I mean, I know there's civilian stuff that go hotter at 4 or 5, but 3 is a more common set. So if you're going well beyond 3, you're not trying to get a better hot rod reactor. You have other other things in mind. Let's put it that way.
Or so Navy reactors are enriched much greater than that, and that is for size constraints. You need your reactor to fit into a submarine, so it can't be super big.
Yeah, even the aircraft carrier reactors are not very big.
You were on a D. What was your reactor core? Let me guess. Let me guess. You were on an A6W, A5W.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah. What'd you have?
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I believe it was 6. But
okay, A6W. I was the one I worked on was D2G, and it's going to surprise people.
Oh wow!
But the core was the size of a trash can. The average trash can. That's the size of the core. So I think a lot of people think they're a lot larger than they really are. No, this reactor was. You go out to your curb and you have a trash can. That's the size of a D2G reactor core.
Yeah.
Wait.
Mine was probably about the volume of a couple like king size beds, like stacked on top of each other and just kind of turned on edge.
You're on an aircraft carrier. I was on a destroyer.
Well, I was just saying that the thing is that 2 of those power the whole aircraft carrier, which is a very big thing. If this had been like a diesel plant, that boiler would have been a whole heck of a lot bigger.
Yeah, we had 2. We had M1 and M2. I was in charge of M1. What?
Steve, we're on a nuclear-powered destroyer?
Yeah, USS Truxtun, CGN-35.
He's old.
I'm old.
Well, okay, fair.
We've established this fact. I am not young.
Although, he's not 100 million years old, so I still got a few years on him.
Yeah.
She's looking at me like, and you're still breathing, Steve. You're still alive.
So one of the problems.
Wait, 1 second, real quick, if I don't mind. Real quick, hate to interrupt you, but why? I'm just kind of curious. I was on a nuke destroyer.
Well, because those
cruiser destroyers, same thing. Back then.
Yeah, but we had some guys that were staff at NPTC when I was there who were, they went to prototype in Orlando and all that jazz, and even they were they went to Power School in Orlando, and I couldn't find anybody who had been on a nuclear powered destroyer, right? So so you're like a unicorn. I've been looking for you.
Congrats, you found one.
Well, hey, okay. So first of all, Submariners is optional, obviously. So I was like, you want me to do what? No. I like seeing the stars. I like breathing fresh air. I did not volunteer for Submariner work, even though they get paid more. But no, not going to happen. But so yes, I was on the very few. There's not a lot of destroyers out there, and that got decommissioned in. I think it was 1997, give or take. It turned into razor blades.
But you didn't like the claustrophobic nature of.
No.
Now.
Surface ships are already claustrophobic, man.
When I was on that sub, I was a civilian there doing a particular function. I was a guest, and they were also doing I guess it was a British admiral that was also being hosted, and so I actually got to share the quarters with the British admiral. And that was enormous because I saw things that they said people slept in. And it's like,
the coffin racks?
Yeah, and it's like, you actually fit in there?
Okay. So I got to go out on the Rhode Island, which is a boomer, for like a week, which was super fun. But what was funny, so this was so submarines weren't integrated with women until 2012. And even then that was only like a few, and it was only officers. So the submarine that I went out on didn't have any female sailors on it. And so what they did was they brought 9 women, like all of the female instructors from my command. There were 9 of us, and we took over one of the 9-man bunk rooms with the coffin racks. And so I slept in those with like the missile tube at my feet for
now let's clarify for the people that are out there wondering, because I was in, women weren't allowed to be nukes. Now, this was not a sexist thing. There's a reason for this. The reason is when you're working around radiation can cause biological issues, and especially on the germline. So I think a lot of it was because they were afraid of a possible radiation affecting women more than it would men for biological reasons. Now, this is what I heard. I don't know if that's actually the actual case of it, because I'm not a biologist. But I heard that one of the reasons why they didn't allow nukes back then that were women was the fact that they're more susceptible, biologically speaking, for germline mutations than males are through the ovum.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what
it makes sense to me at the time. I mean,
yeah, I don't know about the state of radiation health in the 80s. Because
radiation is bad, like it is now.
Yeah,
radiation bad.
I know and I don't even know when. I mean, like billets in the military for women have been slowly opening up over the last like 40 years,
sure,
right?
Absolutely.
And so now all jobs in the military have to be open to both men and women. So, yay! But the issue with submarines was so the issue with submarines is like on fast attacks when you have to hot rack, right? So you don't have your own bed. And so yeah, one of the issues with submarines is actual like housing, and then concerns with like, I mean, when we were there, they would just like, the showers are yours for these 3 hours of the day, and no one's allowed in that room during that time. And that's when we were allowed to shower. And generally,
yeah, that's the only inconvenient thing. Like, see, when I was in the military, that would have been a problem on a surface ship, right? Showering. Right. Now, personally, I wouldn't give a damn either way. I would have co-ed showers, and I wouldn't even give a shit about it, right? I don't care. Most people in the middle, people have this weird thing about sexual things like that. People usually don't care when all you care about is if a person can do their job.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I care about. I don't care if the person next to me was male, female, whatever. I just wanted to make sure they relieved me on time. And it didn't make me stand extra watches. That was my consideration. And if there's a disaster or a casualty, by casualty I mean reactor casualty, not like a person casualty, but if you have an incident, they can take care of it, because part of my job, I don't know, Dapper, you were reactor interim supervisor too, right? Interim supervisor? Okay, so you didn't qualify interim supervisor?
No, I'm actually not sure that was an actual watch that was on the carrier.
Okay, so interim supervisor for my ship was basically you're in charge of everything. You own the plant.
For some reason, we call it reactor supervisor, and that's why I'm
same thing.
Okay, yeah.
So when you reach that top station from inside the reactor plant, there's other stations in the control room, but inside the reactor plant itself, you're top dog. Your main thing is to make sure that there's a casualty, that other people know what they're doing to make sure that casualty is taken care of. Whether you have a partial, loss of coolant, whether you have a cold water accident, whether you have a steam rupture, whatever it is, you have to know all the procedures, know where to find them, and make sure that people act accordingly. That's one of the hardest jobs, I think, of being in a nuke, is because you're constantly running drills. What if this happens? What do you do here? What valve do you do this? Do you understand the concepts that if you open this valve and you have a cold water accident, what's going to happen to the reactor? That's what they train you for. Would you agree?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a huge part of any qual card for any watch was just the casualty, like emergency procedures for various casualties. Like, okay, you know, the reactor's cran. What do you do? Okay, there's a fire. What do you do? Okay, if you're say sitting throttlement or something. Okay, there's now a leak in your your reducer, so that you're now no longer at a vacuum. So the steam is just leaking out. What do you do? And that was probably like 2/3 of most qual cards was just emergency procedures.
I would say my favorite thing to teach was like when I was teaching reactor dynamics, was like what happens inside the reactor like during a cold water casualty.
I love that stuff.
It's so much fun.
That was my favorite stuff, and we have to have a presentation. I did a presentation link a long time ago, but it's very superficial. But I remember doing the quantitative analysis or the qualitative analysis, where you would say, okay, and you'd use Charles and Boyle's law and all this other stuff. So you say, okay, if temperature goes up, pressure goes down here, you have thermal expansion here, you have neutron, the average mean free path changes here, you have criticality here, it goes up here, you have a 6-factor formula, and it would now correct me if I'm wrong, because again, this was years ago for me, but I remember distinctly that when I would do these calculations, they would take up massive amounts of blackboard space.
Yeah.
They were not just something you just said, okay, derive this and say this. When you did a lot of these calculations, especially for startup rate equations, and when you were dealing with delayed neutron precursors and you're doing with beta bar, those were where the physics came in. That's where you had to have an understanding of the physics itself.
And you'd fill up whole chalkboards.
Whole chalkboards of just stuff. I remember it was like, we called it squiggle, by the way. I don't know if you called it that. It was the average logarithmic energy decrement per collision coefficient.
Yep.
Lethargy.
Oh, I thought the squiggly dragon is what I called it.
Squiggly dragon.
I remember my prototype board. I don't think any question took up less than one full chalkboard.
Yeah.
And quite a few of them took up more than one.
And we'll get Landon back in a second, but I love this. And this was my favorite thing about Nuke School. They would say, briefly explain in detail.
In detail. Yeah.
How do you want to do that exactly?
I have to say that one of the things that happened on the sub, they didn't quite like, as the captain announced that I could ask anyone a question about anything regarding the operation of the sub. And their job was to explain it to me. And if I didn't understand, their task was to report to the instructor and get instruction, right? And so, I was curious about stuff, so I tried to limit my questions, but I would not allow them to acronym me and say, well, blah, 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 blah. And I say, well, what's that acronym mean? And that's where some of them got, what is it? How does it, what do you mean by this? What do you mean? Not quote me what's in the book, but explain to me what it means and what are those terms.
Yeah, but not single speaking.
Yeah, we were pretty strict about that when I was even in the fleet. It's like, no, don't use the acronym or whatever the symbol is.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I'll say back in terms of reaction stuff, one of the things that's kind of complicated in a device as it's going through the generations, right? And depending on your device, you might have these shakes, these 10 nanometer cycles or generations going forward. You might have 56 years, depending on the device, 70 of these generations, right? And if you're effective, fully effective, half your yield comes in the last 10 nanoseconds, right? And a quarter yield comes in the previous 10 nanoseconds. And so if your device stops 2 or 3 generations before the end, your reaction stops, then you lose 99% of your yield. So you can get a reaction going, and it's called a fizzle, but it won't be particularly energetic. One of the problems that happens is as the reaction starts going, you get temperatures, right? Literally, and you can get temperatures in measured in billions of degrees. And a billion Kelvin, those sorts of temperatures, and the gamma and X-ray flux is so strong that what you have now is plasma, not a metal. And yet you've got to have this thing go through stages, right? You've got to get your fission going to trigger your fusion, to trigger your fission, to trigger your fusion, to trigger your fission. And I think one of the things you said, probably to simplify, is that U-238 is not a fissionable product normally in a reactor, but But if you have fast neutrons,
Yes. If you have fast neutrons, absolutely.
and guess what you do in a nuclear device is you generate fast neutrons.
Now,
And guess where those fast neutrons come from? That fusion stuff, right? That's one of the things that
Right.
it's there is to give you those fast neutrons.
To be
go
fair,
forward.
nuclear reactors tend to generate fast neutrons. It's just that
Yeah.
you then moderate them.
yeah,
Yes.
normally through a reaction you have non-thermalized neutrons, which would be called fast neutrons, and
Yeah.
they go through every time they hit an atom, they're going to have a little lethargy. They're going to have to lose a little more energy each time, and that path that they take, the mean free path, that depends on the distance between the water molecules, right? So the
Sure.
moderator, which is the water, not just keeps the reactor cool, but it actually acts to slow down these fast neutrons into thermal neutrons because the uranium-235 likes to absorb slower neutrons. It's called the microscopic cross-section for absorption. See, I remember something from nuke school. You know why? Because I studied.
Yeah, and that's one of the big differences between most modern reactors and what happened in Chernobyl, where their
Yes.
moderator liked to moderate better when it got hotter, which meant that even more fast neutrons were then thermalized.
Yeah, that had a positive coefficient reactivity.
Right. So as that moderator, which I believe was graphite,
Yeah, it
as
was
it
graphite.
warmed up, it had a right. It's a terrible idea.
Terrible.
Well, they're cheap, right? It's Russia, right? They just all they cared about was just make it.
And that's the
power
thing. Is
cheaply.
that I think that's sort of is something that is on the level of criminal that Russia operated carbon reactors. They know better. They know better. And
I mean,
and
look,
the
these are the
fact
people.
that Chernobyl reactor was operating is a stain on the
Soviet Union.
Yeah.
I mean, one of
It's disgusting.
many stains on Soviet Union.
Yeah.
I mean,
But I can't tell
if
you
we
the
wanna get-
contempt for that
Oh,
design.
yeah.
Well,
it's terrible.
they just
It's
recently had another accident. Obviously, they were testing
Yes.
something that had a radiological contamination. 5 people were killed. I believe they're scientists. There was a radiation cloud that was produced. So real quick, I mean, because we go on this for an hour, I try to keep these things around about 90 minutes, even though we could probably talk about this forever. And please, Maddie, we want you back, please.
Yes.
If you had a good time, awesome. So, good. We didn't. We love when guests come back. It's a good thing. But let's talk real quick before I forget about nuking hurricanes because people have asked about that.
Oh,
Yeah.
And okay, so I looked into this a little bit, and I'm going to give you my perspective, and then you guys have experts, especially as climate change expert, kind of guide me. So the way I looked at it, the way I could get from the numbers, hurricanes generally have about over the life expectancy of their term is about 10,000, equivalent to about 10,000 nukes. And it was like 10 to the 19th power or joules. A nuke is about 10 to the 14th joule. So we're talking about a difference of about 100,000, give or take, magnitude. So if you use a nuke to try to somehow stop a hurricane, you're basically throwing sand at a hurricane. You're not.
I mean, you might as well turn on a fan and try to blow against the hurricane, right?
All it's going to do,
because the largest nuclear device ever set off is order of magnitude smaller than a reasonable
the
size.
Tsar bomb. Yeah, the Tsar bomb.
Yeah. And it just. I mean, all it would do is give you a little bit more radioactive clouds floating around. So when it achieves landfall, you have added insult to injury.
Yeah.
So there is one thing that I saw in the news reports, though, and it was that the suggestion was to actually nuke tropical storms that were forming west of Africa. And my immediate thought was, well, that doesn't really change the meteorological conditions that are causing storms to form.
Exactly.
Right.
You might get a delay, but it doesn't seem like you're actually going to prevent a hurricane overall.
Even
No, I mean you're better off because again, even those tropical storms have lots of energy in them.
Oh yeah.
You're better off trying to limit the amount of nucleation, that is water molecules finding dust, right? But that's a problem because places like Sahara or Namibian desert produce all kinds of thing called sand and in the air, and you see those sand clouds where water goes around, and that's things like the Amazon or the Central American rainforest come from by virtue of the fact we've got a desert over in Africa, and stuff blows
Well, let's ask Maddie real quick. Maddie, as a climate change person or expert in meteorology, because you're the unicorn. You have expertise in nuclear and meteorology. I mean, again, you're fast becoming my favorite guest just for that fact.
The resume is weird.
I love that. No, I love when people are all over the place. I really do, because I'm one of those people, as you can tell. I like being all over the place. But do you think it's a smart idea to nuke a hurricane?
No.
Give me your expert opinion.
I legitimately don't understand. I legitimately don't understand the thought process that would get someone to thinking that was a good idea, and what the goal would be. I don't know if that makes sense, but okay. So
I think you'd probably dissipate it, blow it out. Get up. It's okay. I maybe this. You know how if you in a fire situation, if you expose something like a fire to too much oxygen, it can actually go out, kind of thing.
That's not how hurricane. Okay, so this is how hurricanes work.
Shocker! It's not how it works.
Right. That's not how this works. Okay, so there's a few ingredients that you need for a hurricane. Right. One, you need an existing low pressure system. You need surface ocean waters being 80 Fahrenheit, and you need that to be well mixed down for a decent depth. So you need warm ocean water, and you need warm ocean water for fairly deep.
Because ocean water will evaporate easier than cold. Right? Exactly. That's why you don't have hurricanes forming over Antarctica.
Well, hurricanes form because if you have cyclonic activity this way, if you have rotational energy this way, doesn't it go like that?
That's a
tornado. Okay.
That's a tornado. So a hurricane is the closest thing in the world to a perfect heat engine, right? That exists.
That's true. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is the rising motion that you get in the circulation is just a very strong convective cell, right? So it's just convection going on a large.
Don't you have convection cells? A whole bunch of them that contribute to the hurricane.
Yeah. So it's a large scale system where you have evaporative heating, right? So you get warm ocean water, it's evaporating. Now you have warm moist air. Warm moist air likes to rise. As it rises, it cools. Because this is such a large system, right? It moves away from that initial low pressure system. And then as it rises and moves away, it's cooling, and then it sinks back down. And now we have a big circulation going.
And it builds up.
And it builds up. You also need, other ingredients, you have to be at least 5 degrees latitude away from the equator, and you need very weak vertical wind shear. Because if you have strong vertical wind shear, then you're going to tip over that convective cell, right? So this is unlike a tornado. When a tornado forms, you have horizontal vorticity that gets shifted to vertical vorticity by strong vertical wind shear. But a hurricane, you get the rising motion very differently. Very different.
But, yes. Now it's kind of interesting things. I admire people that are involved, that label themselves as climate scientists, because unfortunately there are people that politicize that branch of science, making it very difficult to do things, no matter in multiple sides, not just them, right? Multiple sides. And so planetary scientists, I tend to prefer to study weather patterns in other planets, because no one yells at me about conditions on Venus or something like that. And it's kind of funny because
we want climate change on Venus, but just the other way.
So something like, for example, on Jupiter, because you have a deep atmosphere, you have a very, very different process, and the Great Red Spot has been hurricanes have been going for at least 400 years, and a couple Earth diameters in size. And it turns out from Juno, it's actually quite deep. I mean, the thermal signature of that thing, they can tell by mass distribution, goes 20-30% into the planet, right? This is a tall, deep thing that's been going for a couple of centuries, and so in your Earth condition, the problem with Earth is its atmosphere is really kind of tiny compared with the big gas giants, right?
Even compared to
Neptune has an insane hurricane system that's been watching going on, where they get speeds that are, because the speed of sound is different there, that are on the order of I guess converting to miles per hour, like 1,100 miles per hour type winds in some of their hurricanes.
So like order of magnitude larger than what we get
Yes,
Right.
yes. But it's kind of funny because if Earth's atmosphere were thicker, then how would you think that hurricanes? Let's say if you made the atmosphere 10 times as thick, what would happen to the hurricane formation, you think? Could you have hurricanes forming at higher and lower latitudes as a result of that?
So not lower. To get them at lower latitudes, you need to speed up the Earth's rotation rate. We could get, I think it would be easier to make a hurricane because you're going to be less likely to tip it over.
Sure, yes. You got more supporting structure around it.
Yeah, you have more supporting structure. So it'd certainly be easier to create a hurricane. I think one of the important differences between Earth and a planet like Neptune or Jupiter is Earth's bimodal topography. So continents get in the way of things.
Yes.
And so you can't make a hurricane over a continent. So I know on one of a favorite tool in the climate scientist toolbox is a numerical weather model that is water world, right? So no continents.
Yes.
It's a lot easier to predict the weather if land doesn't get in the way because friction is a thing. So what I'm wondering about your question is if we made the Earth's atmosphere 10 times thicker, about the relative importance of the density of the atmosphere versus the relative importance of terrain specifically at the surface.
Sure, so that if you had 10 times the atmospheric mass, right?
10 times the atmospheric mass.
Would the continents pose as much of a burden to a storm? Now, the Southern Ocean, when you get storms going in there, because there's not anything much to go on there. Those southern storms basically spin around until the sun sets, literally. 6 months later, they get started in the spring and they'll go and go and go and go until the fall and the sun sets and they lose energy. And
near the North Pole, right, you get what are called tropopause polar vortices, which are things that I study. And tropopause polar vortices are large systems, so they're large cyclonic system, cyclonic or anticyclonic. Big storm systems, but they're happening on the tropopause, right? So really strong winds and all of this. But they're happening on the tropopause, and those, if they are camping out basically over the North Pole, those will last. We've tracked them for 3 months.
Yes, the similar thing in Antarctica. You get because the prevailing direction of wind in Antarctica is down, right? You've got the wind is effectively rising at the equator because rises, goes around and comes into the polar region and comes down, and it creates a high pressure bubble. The high pressure bubble sits there, but chaotically gets a little bit off center, and the Earth's spin eventually causes it to fly off, and it makes it extraordinarily difficult to predict the weather because you don't know which case the polar vortex is where it's going to go. It's extraordinarily difficult. And but on the other hand, if you're there, as I've been a frequent visitor, when you get those katabatic winds going, you get howling storms, right? And very fast, you'll get 140 knots of stuff. There you're basically everything stops for a couple of days while the bubble goes whoosh off into higher latitudes. That's a different sort of thing than a hurricane, right? As you know.
Right.
But it would be really bad if the other thing is the Earth's tilt. If we rolled the Earth over on its side, right? Let's say 90 degrees, 23 degrees, 90 degrees. Then you'd have summer on one hemisphere baking hot and cold on the other side, and you'd have this movement of air from the hot side to the cold side. And then you get your fall where you get everything sort of roast, and then you get back again by the other side. So you'd have these super, super hot summers and ultra, ultra cold winters, where again, it would make our current climate. And so it's fortunate that the Earth's axis is relatively vertical, thanks to our moon, because if we roll on the side, then we'd have, we would have, temperatures on one side being much, 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 much hotter and cold on the other side. And then you have a really bad hurricanes and
Let me ask you this,
windstorms.
Maddie. So how would this work if the Earth was flat? I'm so curious about this, man. I have listened to them try to explain how it would work on a flat Earth.
Oh,
Hell if I know. I have no idea.
Maybe I can give it a shot. I've listened to a lot of flat
Oh,
Earth.
this ought to be good. And then I want
Okay.
let Maddie give it a go.
Oh, yeah,
I know you can do it because you do this stuff all the time. I want to
Oh.
hear from Maddie because Maddie, do you deal with flat earthers?
I try not to.
You're smart. This is why she's smart. You know, it goes to
And
MIT.
I'm not.
Yeah, and that's why we don't go to MIT.
well,
Okay, so
well, do you have to say, are you a flat earther? Is it you're talking about flat earthers that deny existence of gravity or ones that accept it?
it doesn't matter. Pick one. Just
Here's my
why would
real
it not work on a flat Earth?
for a flat earther in terms of hurricanes, right? Because northern hemisphere hurricanes rotate counterclockwise, right? And southern hemisphere hurricanes rotate clockwise. And this is very easy to explain.
Yep.
You know that the Earth is a sphere, which is rotating, and you understand what the Coriolis effect is, right? So if I was going to be super generous to a flat earther, which I probably would be inclined to,
I'm not. I'm really not these days.
I have never interacted with them, so I have feelings still. My question would be like, okay, so if you're going to present a model, right, of the flat Earth, can you explain this? I'm sure I'm sounding hilarious yes, but can you explain this observed phenomena inside your worldview? And that would actually be my question.
Well, but of course, people like Red Eye are on the alleged continent, and it's all they saying that's fake stuff. But I guess part of it is, how would you have an atmosphere? Because if it was a disk and it's spinning,
right?
Then shouldn't the atmosphere go fling off to the side, and you'd have basically lose your atmosphere? Particularly the ones that don't believe in gravity.
Because if gravity isn't real, then we wouldn't have an atmosphere, and so we just would all be dead. So that'd be fine.
But some people say, well, there's atmosphere in space, right?
That's not true.
Yeah,
but the Earth isn't flat, so
you know that. I know that, but
except in Discworld.
All right, so let me ask the Dapper. Do you want to chime into that? Then I have one more
all right.
question before we wrap.
So here's my best flat Earth impersonation for how hurricanes and southern hemisphere cyclones work. Okay, so the sun and the moon circle, over the disk of the Earth, right, which is all contained inside of a dome. And what they do is they heat up the sun heats up the water underneath it most. And so that's where we get our warm water that we need for a hurricane. And then what gives it that spin is actually vortices created by the sun moving through the air, creating little vortices as it goes. Like a
Never
wake.
thought about that. So you have so the sun's going through the atmosphere and just producing thermal convections of some kind?
Well, it creates
Wow.
thermal convections, but it also gives it spin because if you move something really fast through the water, you
Non-laminar
get little
flow.
vortices. Yeah,
Okay.
but
that's
when
what
I
produces.
when I observe a total solar eclipse.
Yeah, exactly.
And I
The
have
viscosity would
40
screw you. Sorry, Landon.
Oh,
Hang on a second, Landon.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
what was that? Viscosity?
I would say that the viscosity of the air is enough that you don't have non-local effects through the whole depth of the atmosphere. So
it is problematic at best.
yeah, so sorry. What is happening in the atmosphere at the surface is unrelated to what is happening. Not unrelated, but like information about like wind motion doesn't get translated from the surface to say as high as airplanes fly.
hey, I didn't say it was going to work. I just said I was
Yeah,
going to do an
yeah.
impression.
He's not advocating for this, by the way. Just
you know,
FYI.
I understand that. I'm just immediately going into
As a
Go ahead,
But
Landon.
as a planetary scientist, that I've had observed, I've had over 40 minutes of totality that I've observed on
nice.
16 and 17 eclipses. When I study the solar eclipse, you see the corona, you see that the gases. How do they explain if there's wind? Wouldn't there be like this long tail as the sun is moving through the atmosphere, like a comet type thing? Wouldn't you have how do they explain the plasma coming off the sun?
They'd probably say that you just didn't make those observations and you're lying.
Oh,
Honestly, that's
exactly.
usually what it comes down to. Is
Yeah,
you're just part of the conspiracy.
Math doesn't represent reality. All right, so one more question before we wrap up. What do you think, as a planetary scientist and climate person, about Elon Musk wanting to nuke Mars? You've heard about that?
Why do you want to nuke?
Oh, this is a big thing by Elon Musk. He even has T-shirts out on this. He wants to nuke Mars.
He wants to sublimate the polar ice caps, which are primarily composed of dry ice, to increase atmospheric pressure and temperature on the surface of Mars to make it easier to colonize.
There's a reason why Mars doesn't have an atmosphere.
Agreed.
It doesn't have the mass, right? It doesn't have the mass.
Or the magnetic field.
And so things like oxygen at even Mars cold temperatures achieves escape velocity, right? It loses its atmosphere. So if you put a bunch of air there, they would be fine, and they would be basically the air would take off.
Well, I think his idea is something like he wants to make it something where, like, every few hundred years, you're going to have to do something to get some air back, but at least it could be something that would be easier to build pressure vessels to withstand.
Right.
Which, I mean, I don't think it's a great idea, but I understand the logic of saying we could go with current Mars atmosphere, which is basically like, what, 0.06 bar on a good day?
So Mars's atmosphere is 2 orders of magnitude less air.
If I remember correctly,
very rarefied.
If I remember correctly, I used to know this, but if I remember correctly, it's about 0.06 bar at mean surface level on Mars.
That's about right.
It can go up to about like 0.07 or 8. Very low elevation.
I mean, surface pressure is about 0.63 atmospheres. It's actually 0.006.
0.006?
Yeah, 0.006.
So
6/10 of a percent.
Yeah, I was off by an order of magnitude. Whoops.
I mean, but the problem is that Mars's mass is kind of, it's only 0.1 Earth.
Yeah, it's tiny.
It's a tiny planet. Didn't have the rocky stuff tend to be towards the sun, and Jupiter ripped off on the other side. So it's a pretty anemic thing. So there's a reason why. But I mean, Elon Musk, unfortunately, seems to be the Donald Trump of technology.
Yeah.
He is allowed to say stupid things, and people say you're not, and that's a stupid thing, right?
Yeah, like Mr. Sears brought up the Hyperloop, which is just an awful idea.
Oh yeah, awful.
I mean,
what happened?
His notion that all telescopes should be space-based, and they go back and say, well, then why in the world did you launch a dumb car? Why didn't you at least launch instead of a mast like a telescope if you think everything needs to be space-based, right? But,
yeah.
But
the whole thing, real quick, the whole thing with the hypertube. Have you guys seen the catastrophic failure? What happens when you have a tube like that at vacuum? If you even have a small deformation in the structure itself, it's catastrophic.
Speed of sound, shock waves.
Don't they?
The whole thing.
Engineers know about this stuff. So how is it they did not think ahead of time? Going, you know what? This is not structurally a good idea.
No, Steve. The engineers.
This is because you two are nukes and got drilled into your head about what do you do in casualties.
Plastic deformation. I had to do numerous hydrostatic testing, and I got to tell you, not fun. You're sitting there and you have a couple thousand some odd psi, and you think to yourself, I love this, and I'm not even joking here. One of the ways you detect if your structure failed is you die.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Pretty good test.
So,
am I exaggerating here? I mean, if that's a catastrophic failure, you're dead. That's not a great test to me. I was never like those things.
High pressure steam is deadly.
Oh yeah.
I had to watch a video on what a steam casualty in a nuke plant would look like. Oh my gosh, that scared the pants off of me.
Man.
So steam is very. The other side of the coin is vacuums are like, for example, NASA has a tall vacuum chamber, right? You've probably seen the video of a bowling ball and a feather dropped.
Yes, I know that vacuum
in there.
chamber, yep.
Well, when they pump the air to that thing, people are not anywhere near that device, because if it fails and the thing collapses, stuff gets pretty good momentum, and it goes through the center and comes back out, and you get bad situation.
Right.
Much badness.
All right. Well, anyways, we are going to wrap this up because, like I said, I like to keep these things digestible, especially for the DEFCON 1 science, because there's so much good content in these things, and I want people to be able to watch them in one go. But we are going to bring you back. Trust me, I know you're probably very, very busy, but if you enjoyed this, just message me if you want to come back on too. If you say, hey, you know what, I got a free night.
Oh, we didn't touch on the cheating.
Well,
and that's what I say. I really
people cheated
enjoyed
and they got busted.
the time coming to focus on there and but to do more of the comparison and comparing contrasting of reactors to stuff. But
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, we could talk about like there's a whole bunch of different types of reactors out there. I mean, like dozens and types. But I don't know all the distinctions. I only studied the pressurized water reactors. So when you start getting into the boiling water reactors, or you start getting into the molten types, or the supercritical reactors, they're called, I don't understand any of that. So not even going to front on that.
And by the way, those people that say, yes, I'd like to have fewer nuclear devices in the world. And by the way, one of the best ways to get rid of these many metric tons of plutonium is to operate reactors, right? If you take it and bury it someplace, someone's going to dig it up and mess with it. You'd be better off taking the plutonium, run it through reactors, and reprocess the fuel. Reprocessing is not enrichment to split a lot of the plutonium, and then the stuff that's left over, poison it with cadmium and barium and so forth. Get it into its move it into its metal states, because plutonium has really weird metal states that are not good for reaction. And make it essentially, after you get the fuel out of it, then take the whatever left over and poison it, so that it would be very, 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 very difficult to try to reuse it to develop a device. That's how you get rid of plutonium.
Yeah.
You don't bury it. You split its atoms.
I have one or two questions from the just one question actually from the audience before I enter this. I got about it, so let me ask it quick. Oshkosh, my friend Oshkosh asked, Andrew Yang recently proposed his climate plan if he was president. In his plan, he wants to push forward thorium-based nuclear power. Is this a good idea, and what are the pros and cons? That's actually a really full question
Really?
that we could probably spend a lot on. How about we actually kind of save that for when we do this again, we talk about thorium-type reactors.
It'd be fun. I assume you're familiar with the pros and cons of thorium, or we can
honestly no.
study up on them. But it's an interesting question.
But I'm not. I study pressurized water reactors. That's a different beast. But if you guys want to touch on it real quick, feel free.
I have a slightly more generalized thing, not necessarily thorium, but if you're serious about, climate change, then you need to be serious about expanding nuclear power for
Agreed.
Civilian applications. If you're not serious about that, then you're not serious about climate change.
I totally agree. But do you want to touch on thorium real quick? I mean, do you think it's a better way to go? I mean, thorium has a different cross section for absorption, so a lot of the physics are completely different. But, well, I shouldn't say completely different, but they're different numbers that go into all that. So would it require a completely different design? Is it more steerable?
One of the pluses of thorium is that, my understanding is that it's easier to build a smaller sized reactors with a thorium fuel. And so that's the main.
So it's a better power density.
Better power density.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's my understanding of the main plus, because there was for a while, especially I think India, their Navy was looking at thorium powered smaller vessels.
Canada did some good research, and the US did as well.
Yeah.
But the problem is that when we were building, we're making lots of plutonium for nuclear devices, we built up a uranium nuclear industry.
Yeah.
And you might say, well, what's that mean? Well, it means that we had a lot of stuff uranium-based and not thorium-based.
Mm-hmm.
And the design of the reactors are going to be different enough that you can't just translate one to the other. That's to say, I think thorium reactors have some really positive benefits.
Well, and probably, and we can discuss that next time. So I want to thank you guys for joining us. This was, again, something I would look forward to doing. I like talking about nuke stuff because that's one of the subjects I actually had to go formally be trained in. I wasn't formally trained in a lot of stuff. I was just kind of general across the board. But I think I could say, because I know in nuke school, we at least got a really good basic understanding of a lot of physics and concepts relating to nuclear power, to say the least. So I want to thank you for joining us, Maddie and Landon and Dapper. I'm putting my Patreon in the live chat, also in the video description. My Patreon has gone up considerably, which means I'm going to be putting out a lot more product. We have a lot of things that we've been talking about. We're going to be doing more DEFCONs with Landon, hopefully. We're going to be doing just all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's going to be hopefully building this channel up a lot. Again, probably only 2 things a week, maybe 3 at the most, but probably just 2 for a while. People know there's a lot of other stuff going on, so I'm kind of not making any formal commitments until about another month or two to things get resolved. But until then, we're going to be putting out a lot of stuff like this that we hope people enjoy. I happen to love this kind of stuff, so I hope that the people learn something from this.
And if you like this channel, please support it, right? Even if he says he's getting more on Patreon. If you like stuff, then throw a couple of bucks the creator's way, right? Because that's how this stuff continues. So please consider supporting this channel. Also, shout out to Pimp Monk. His dad is in a better state right now, but again, he's not working. And if you could throw a few bucks his way to help his family deal with his dad's recovery and rehab, that would be much appreciated. But again, please support this channel for the work that McRae is doing. I'm a supporter of his channel, and if you even if it's just a buck or two,
every little bit helps, man. I talk to every Patreon I have, whether it's $1 or $100 a month. I talk to them all. I do value every one of them. Maddie, do you have something you want to show?
Yeah, I would, if you guys want to listen to me talk about science.
Well,
yes.
Why not?
Yes.
Yes, I think we can imagine that. Yeah.
Brand new baby YouTube channel. It's called ScienceSideUp. I've only got about 100 subscribers right now, so I'd love some love. And I try to do. The semester started back up, so I'm only putting out a video every week or two. But
who's your target audience? What's your
my target audience? I try to talk about. My target audience are people with an interest in science who have not had the opportunity to spend their entire adult life doing it. So I try to talk about things from just kind of across the board, but not on a super technical level, on a more like general understanding. So I like to view myself as an advocate for like science literacy.
Yay!
Yeah, we all like that, actually. That's part of our thing. I mean, that's what this channel I'm going to be primarily focusing on is kind of scientific literacy, kind of people just talking about science. More people have been messaging me that they've really been enjoying learning things that they didn't learn before. And the greatest thing that I've seen is people telling me they've gone back to school to learn about these topics, and they renewed an interest in these topics. That I cannot get any bigger compliment than that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Could one of the mods post her link to her?
Yeah, I'm working
channel
on that right now. I've
so
actually
I'm working on it too.
People can subscribe to his stuff, because again, people who explain stuff, that's one of the best things I think that you can do as a human being, is to teach others and inspire others. That's a
I just put it in the live chat there, and I will put it in the video description as soon as it's done. Stuart for $10 says, for your rum and fun from Down Under. Thank you. I still have my rum. My rum has lasted me forever. I bought that dark rum, and it's like only half gone. I don't drink that much. I can't. I have stomach issues. So rum and coke nights take a lot out of me if I drink a lot. So, and I still have, I have it? Yeah, wait 1 second, guys. 1 second, check it out. This was bought for me from a very kind Patreon or a fan 3 months ago, I think now. I still have that much left in it, so I don't. Yeah, and I love this stuff, but I sip it. I have like half a finger.
You don't chug good stuff.
So I don't drink that very much, and so that's my only 2 bottles of alcohol I've had for like 3 months at least. Bubble burster, but I tell you what, when this is gone, Stuart, I will be buying another one from your money. Thank you. I mean, I always keep some of this around. It's really good. Bubble Buster, $2. I enjoyed the chat. Thank you. Harvey, $5. Thank you for that. Kawasa, it's still nuclear, not nuclear. Yeah, I'll leave you with this. Well, we'll all go down the line. I don't care how it's pronounced. I say nuclear, but I don't care if you say nuclear or nuclear. I don't care. It is irrelevant. It can be pronounced either way. I honestly think it's a dumb issue. What do you guys think?
I think it's a little bit silly to be super nitpicky on it, but I do try to say nuclear, mostly so that no one nitpicks.
Okay, well, you're right. Yeah, that's how it's pronounced. But I'm just kidding. Maddie, you want to weigh on that?
I mean, I'm from Oklahoma, so I can't judge anyone on how they pronounce anything.
There you go. I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, folks, dictionaries are describe language use. They don't prescribe how you're supposed to pronounce it, and so I think that both pronunciations are valid.
Agreed.
And someone says, I tend to say nuclear, but if someone say nuclear or so like that,
nuclear.
It's yeah, or whatever the thing is, it's like you're understood, and maybe you say one pronunciation is more.
It's more common. It's more common.
More
Yeah.
common than others, but it doesn't mean it's wrong,
No,
right?
no.
So-
Exactly. Special pronunciations are very not to me not right or wrong. It's usage. It's what's most common. If you have an entire city that uses a pronunciation a specific way, nobody's going to say, "Oh, they have an accent or it sounds different." But anyways, Maddie, you had 132 subscribers. Let me do a call out to my listeners. Let's see if we can get like 100 more subscribers in the next, or even double in the next couple days.
Yeah, subscribe to her and give her channel a try.
Yeah, because
she's at 145 now.
I noticed when we do shout outs, it takes about 48 hours for people to watch, and so you may not notice a lot of new subs in the next hour or so, but in the next 48 hours, let me know. You started with 132. Let's see if we can at least almost double you possible in the next couple of days. Is that cool?
Sure. And I say, and
I'll shield
unfortunately,
for your time
YouTube's
coming up.
algorithms are non-deterministic, I think.
They do seem like that, yeah.
Nobody understands YouTube. All right, guys, thank you very much, and good night, all. We appreciate you watching, appreciate all the patronage, and we look forward to seeing you next time on DEFCON 1 Science. Good night.